Hi everyone! For this video, we'll be talking about these three eyeshadow brushes from Fude Bobo, and this actually belongs to her Nebulae series, which is a collaboration collection between her and Chikuhodo. Now, I am so excited for this because this is the first time that I'm trying out brush sets that have a mix of T-Squirrel and Weasel in them. So I don't know how they will perform, I don't know how they will feel, and I don't know how they will actually show itself to us. So I'm actually looking forward to this. Now, before we continue, again, I would like to give a huge thank you to Fude Bobo for sending this my way. I truly appreciate it. Now, this video, by the way, is a continuation of a previous video wherein I actually featured these three brushes, which I also got from Fude Bobo recently. So if you want to see this in action, link is down in the description box. And that's why I already have a full face of makeup on because I used these three brushes and I loved how they worked with me today. Very good brushes, I have to say. Anyway, I digress. It's time for us to talk about these three one by one. So these three brushes belong to the Nebulae series of Fude Bobo, and I was actually able to shoot this under natural light 2 days ago, and take a look on how beautiful they gleam under the light. I think the Nebulae series has one of the most beautiful colorways in the Fude world. But anyway, the pièce de résistance of these three brushes is actually the bristles because it's mixed with T-Squirrel and Weasel. Now, I don't know if T-Squirrel is a specific type of species or if it's a description of a specific color, but I think it's one of the most resilient squirrel bristles in the market because you can actually incorporate this with Weasel. And basing off of the description of Fude Bobo for all of these eyeshadow brushes is that you can use them for cream or powder or even gel types of a formula. And I think that's so amazing and really up my alley because those are the types of formulas that I usually work with eyeshadows. So the first brush that we have here is the S04 brush, and basing off of the brush head design here, you can see that it's round and flat, but there's a minute difference because I can see that it kind of tapers into a point here in the middle. Now, although you can't see it, but you can actually feel it when you brush your finger on the tips here, the middle is actually quite strong. It's actually quite interesting. And when it tapers into the tips here, it kind of thins out. So I think this can also give you some ability to be detailing with your eye makeup application. Okay, but I'm so happy to see that the brush head here keeps its shape quite nicely. Nice snap back into position. The shape retains itself and it doesn't really splay out or bloom out much. So you can actually use this to really build on the color on the eye, be very intent with your eyeshadow application. Look at that, look how strong that is. I'm sure you can feel how the brush head indents into the palm of my hand here. Okay, now just for the sake of giving you an idea of the brush head shape and size of this is the fundamental worker S brush from Sonyoji, and the other brush here is the Lotus Builder. So let me just line them up properly. So just by doing this, I hope it can give you an idea of the brush head, especially if you have some brush heads from Sonyoji available in your collection. Okay, all right. And just for some comparisons, here are my other Weasel makeup brushes. May they be pure Weasel or mixed. So these two brushes here also belong to the Nebulae series of Chikuhodo and Bobodo. Now the main difference is just the length of the bristles. This one is made of pure Weasel. This one has fitched mixed into the Weasel brush head here. And if you put it on the side here, you can also see that these two have thinner cores in the belly here, and that's why these two brushes are actually softer in comparison to the S04 here. Okay, look at that. Now typically this is how Weasel brush heads are made. They're always long and thin like this, or even like this. Look at that. And again, they all have very soft brush heads. Now I think these two they're actually more resilient than these other brushes because maybe the way that they're crimped. Now this is my Tancedo MQ10 here. This is also made of pure Weasel. Now the main difference with this in comparison to the S04 in terms of shape is that the tips of the MQ10 here are actually airier. So if you put it on the side, you can see that. And you can also see that you don't have a fullness of the belly here, but because of the crimping, it looks like it's actually quite full. So what I love about the MQ10 here, because of the airiness, it gives you the ability to be like, to apply eyeshadow color or even like, products in a buffing manner. But for sure with this brush here, the S04, it's gonna be a brush that you'll use to become more intent with your eyeshadow application on your eyes. Again, very, very strong core on the belly here, but still very, very soft and silky. Amazing texture. I like the feel of the S04 on my fingers. And the next brush that we have here is the SO1, and by looking at the brush head design of this is actually a brush that you can use to apply color in the crease area or even as a blending brush. Now, I can actually see that there's so much strength at the core of the brush head here, especially in the middle of the brush head, right here. And I believe this is the one that gives this brush, the ability to buff out and to blend out color. Now, I can see that the brush head here is actually, quite strong at the core and the belly of it. And that's why when I run my fingers through it, it keeps its shape quite nicely and snaps back into position quite nicely. That's nice. And we still have, a certain airiness here at the tips, which for sure will give this brush the ability to buff out and to blend out color. But as I'm pressing it here on my palm, it doesn't really splay out in a circular manner, especially when I press it in the middle. So to use this brush, you'll use this in in a directional manner or in a sweeping manner. Okay. But what a lovely, interesting brush. Look at that. Very nice and very silky to the touch. Amazing sensation on the fingers. Feels very luxurious. Now, this brush actually reminds me of how a Kolinsky brush kind of moves and feels. So I only have one Kolinsky brush in my collection, and I have here the S145 from Chikuhodo. So the S145 here actually looks like it's very, very thin, but it's actually very, very strong and very resilient as well. And it goes back into position quite nicely, and it almost acts the same way as the S01 here. Quite interesting. Both feel very silky and very soft to the touch, and I can also feel that they both have almost the same structural strength of the bristles here, but the Kolinsky brush here feels snappier, the way that you extend a rubber band and then let it go, and it just snaps back faster than the S01 here. Nice difference. Now, in terms of brush head size, so it can give you an idea. So this is the S142 from Chikuhodo. This is made of pure blue squirrel. So the S01 here is just a little bit longer than that, and of course, because this is made of blue squirrel, it's way softer. And the bristle tips of this just splays out more in comparison to the S01 here. Now I have the Chikuhodo J142 here. So both of them look quite similar, but the difference is the J142 here, it actually blooms wider at the tips than the S01 here. And I can also see that the S01 kind of it doesn't really bloom out much, but it kind of curves inward as it reaches the tips of the bristles here. And it also doesn't have a point, just like the J142 here. Okay. And now for other Sonia G brushes, so I have here the Fundamental Crease L brush. Look how fluffy and airy that is. And I have here the Crease Pro brush. So the S01 here in terms of shape is more erect, while these two, they actually bloom out more, they spread out more, especially in the portion where it nears the tips of the bristles. Look at that. And the final brush is the S05, and this one looks to be like a pencil brush, and you can actually use this not only to buff out eyeliner colors in your upper lash line or lower lash line, but you can also use this to enhance your socket line or your outer V portion. Look at that. Oh, it feels very, very sturdy and very, very strong. So for sure, this will pick up a good amount of color from the pan, and for sure this will also deliver a good amount of pigmentation on the eyelids. And I think if you want to create a cut crease, this is the brush that you will actually use. Now in comparison, okay, so these are some of the pencil brushes that I have in my collection. It's not all of them, and the reason why they're all here right now is so that you guys can see the difference in the brush head shape between the S05 here in comparison to all of these. Okay, so the S05 in general looks like it has a bullet kind of a design for the brush head, wherein it tapers into a point, but it's still rounded here. While the rest of the pencil brushes that I have here, they look like they're stouter in the brush heads. Well, except for this brush here. This is the Refer number 3 brush, and if you put it right beside the S05, I think this brush is the one that shares a similar brush head shape and brush head design. But since they are different bristle types, they can be cousins. And this one feels very, very soft. It doesn't have a fullness in the belly in comparison to the S05 here. But again, the brush head shapes are actually quite similar. Look at that. Okay, now this is the Yoshiki by Chikuhodo and Fude Bobo collaboration brush. So this one has red Canadian squirrel and Chikuhodo goat hairs mixed into it. Now in terms of feel, both feel quite similar, very, very silky. But again, because of the strength at the core of the S05 here, it just feels stronger, but they're quite comparable though. Look at that. Very nice. But this brush here, it just has a much more rounder shape. If you have very sensitive eyes, this should be great, but you can only use this for powder products. Okay, so what else do we have here? This is the Refer number 26 brush. They almost share the same brush head length. I think the number 26 brush here is just a little bit longer in terms of brush head length. Yeah, but look how much blooming we have in this brush here. Okay, very similar shape as well, almost bullet-like, and you have rounded tips here where it tapers. Okay, so this is the eyeshadow brush from the Chikuhodo Kakishibu Zome series. This one is shorter and rounder, feels very silky. Now I can say that the fullness of the belly of both of these brush heads are quite similar. They feel quite the same in terms of snappiness and strength. So I guess we know now that we have quite nice blending abilities between these two brushes. Okay, and this is the TS4 brush from Sonia G. This is yellow Canadian squirrel. Feels very, very silky. Look at that. Look at how soft the bristle is here in comparison to that of the S05, because after all, different bristle type mix, but I hope it gives you an idea on the shape and length of the S04. Okay, and next what we have here is the Sonia G Pencil Pro. This is the Pencil L, and this one here is the pencil brush from Mizuho. So again, it will give you an idea just in terms of difference in brush head shape and length. Now, one thing that I have observed, after I have compared these 3 brushes to other brushes in my collection, is that I kept on repeating myself, saying that I can actually feel on how strong these 3 brushes are. And I believe they exert a certain amount of pressure into my palm. So if you're going to use this on the eyes, I think you just have to be very controlled with the pressure that you exert so that it won't feel uncomfortable. But I do have to say though that the tips here are actually quite soft. They're actually quite airy. So I think you don't really need to exert so much effort in order to buff out and to blend out products. And also I think that these brushes were developed to mimic how you'd use brushes for cream or liquid or even gel types of products, maybe eyeshadows or concealers, whatnot, because that's the kind of feel that I get when I started comparing this and just playing it with my fingertips here. They kind of act how a synthetic brush would, but what's just so remarkable is that they're all made of natural bristled fibers. That's actually very interesting for me. And I think like, you know, this is a good addition into the set because it will give the Nebulae series of Bobo a very nice versatility and also, like, you know, diversity. Okay, so let's see how these brushes will work with us today. Okay, so I have the MAC paint pot here in soft ochre, and I'm going to be using the S04 brush. I'm going to pat it gently, and it picks up quite a good amount of color. And let me just add this all over. Now I'm using very light strokes. I'm not really, like, you know, pressing the brush head into my eyelid, and I can actually see that it does deliver the color extremely well and extremely fast without exerting so much pressure. Fantastic. So if you want, like, you know, a one and done eyeshadow type of an application, you can use this brush for that. Now this product has a cream type of a formula, so now what I want to do is I want to use the S04 here for a, like, you know, liquid type of eyeshadow base. So I have this liquid silk from Lisa Eldridge. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of the product here at the back of my hand. Then I'm gonna buff this in a microfiber towel to remove any product from that. Then I'm just gonna pick up the liquid silk with this brush head now. And then I'm just gonna apply this all over. I like the size of the brush head here because it kind of like fits into my eyelid quite nicely. And then I find that I'm actually, like, you know, able to use the brush here in a patting motion like this. I can't really say that it works well in, like, you know, a buffing motion or a windshield wiper kind of a motion. And the reason why is because, again, like, you know, the core of this is actually very, very strong. So this just really helps you to apply, like, you know, opacity and the right amount of color. And if you want to blend everything out, you blend it this way, wherein you're laying it flat on your eyelids and brushing out the edges, the same way that you would use, like, you know, a traditional flat and round eyeshadow brush. But again, I'm actually able to apply the color, like, you know, extremely well and extremely fast with less effort. But again, like, you know, you just have to be very light-handed just so that you don't exert so much pressure on your eyeball. Okay, so now I have this Caviar stick from Laura Mercier, and this is in the color Cocoa. Now, what I want to do is I just want to maybe apply a little bit of this here in my outer V portion. And I'm gonna get the S05 brush. Yeah. And I'm just gonna see on how well this brush will blend out this eyeshadow, and I'm gonna try to see on how well this brush can blend that into my socket line. Oh, it really does the job quite nicely. But, you know, this Caviar stick, I know that they're actually great to use, but sometimes they're a pain to use, especially when you can't blend them out. But I'm seeing that this is actually a great pairing. Look at that. Look how easy it is for me to buff out the color and to blend out the color. And the shape of this brush is very helpful also in me creating, like, you know, a nice lift for my eye. And I'm just going to continue to blend out the color here, soften out the edges. Now, I do have to say that this is one of the most effective brushes that I have ever used to blend out Caviar sticks. I love that. I was not expecting this brush to work very well with a Caviar stick today. Okay, so I got the color Burnished Bronze. Now, this one has a very nice red tone to it, which I love. And I'm just gonna apply this right onto my upper lash line here. It's a very nice also reflect. And I'm just gonna use the same brush to blend that into the color Cocoa. So we have a nice gradation of color. And then I'm just gonna lightly drag that into my inner lash line area. Right, nice blending. And now I'm gonna get more of the burnished copper color and just apply a little bit of that as thinly as possible as I get closer to the inner portion of my eye. And with the same brush, I'm just gonna buff out the edges. Now I'm finding that the brush head here is just a little bit too big to apply detailing work, but it's actually still very useful to be able to buff out and to blend out color, especially if you want to smoke everything out. Okay, so I have the Caviar stick here in Amethyst. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up the product here using the tips of the SO1 here. Okay, and maybe that's what I'm gonna use to add more, like, let's say, color into my socket line area. Yes, I'm seeing a very light wash of color, so I'm quite happy to see that, like, you know, this brush head is actually able to pick up the product from the stick itself. So I'm just, like, you know, doing this because I'm just, like, you know, using this shade to be a blender type of a color. Look at that. Lovely, lovely, lovely. A lovely gradation of color, lovely pickup, lovely buffing ability. I love it so far. Look at how nice and well blended everything is going on here on my eyes. And also one thing, by the way, I do have to say that even if these three eyeshadow brushes exerts a certain amount of pressure on the eyes, it doesn't make my eyes uncomfortable. It doesn't make my eyes, like, you know, feel tired, because there are some brushes when they're just, like, you know, way too strong. As soon as you start buffing everything into your eyelids, you just, like, you know, feel it, like, you know, really making you, like, you know, uncomfortable. But so far, these three brushes are not doing that at all. Fantastic. And now I'm getting more of the cocoa color, and I'm going to add that into my socket line. Ooh, look at how much pigment this Caviar stick applies on the eyes. So I'm just playing around here, and now I'm just going to buff out everything, try to blend out the edges, smoke everything out. And with the S05 brush here, I'm just gonna blend out the edges. And with the S05 brush, I'm just going to intensify the outer V portion, smoke it out a little bit, and also create a nice lift. Amazing. And with a burnish bronze shade, I'm just gonna pick up the color using the tips of this brush here, and I'm just gonna lightly brush that along the outer perimeters of the color cocoa, just so that we have a nice smoky eye going on, and also a very nice blend. I love that. I love that we're actually able to, like, you know, intensify the eye look and also blend it out using these three brushes. And now I have the eyeliner pencil from Wayne Goss, and this is in the color Crystal Merlot. And I'm just gonna apply a little bit of this here in my lower lash line and well into my waterline. Whatever color is left on this brush head, I'm just going to lightly run that across my lower waterline and then create a lift and a blend, just so that we have a nice mix of colors there. Blend it to my socket line. And to finish this off, I'm going to use this liquid eyeshadow from Lisa Eldridge. It's the color Maya. And I'm going to be using the S04 brush here. And I'm just going to lightly pat that on top of my mobile eyelid, because I think the sparkly, like, you know, pinky gold color here will work very well in counteracting with the smokiness of the colors that I applied. And I love how small the brush head is of this S04 here, because I'm actually able to apply the liquid eyeshadow in a very precise manner all over my eyelid. Okay, so I have my VMV Hypoallergenics mascara here. And I'm just gonna apply a nice generous coating all over, just so that we can feel the drama of this eye look. And maybe let's apply a little bit of that here on the lower lashes as well. Fantastic. Look how dramatic this eye look is. Love that. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna dry clean these brushes. I'm just gonna dip them one by one in, like, lucent setting powder and buff out the color in a microfiber towel, just so that we have a much more cleaner brush head to start with again. Okay, so I have the rose gold color. So this is from the Eyes to Mesmerise collection of Charlotte Tilbury. And I'm just gonna pick up the product here from my palette. And I'm gonna lightly brush this across my eyelid. That was actually very easy to apply and very easy to blend out. And the reason why I'm doing this now is because I want to show a dramatic eye look, and I also want to show a gentle eye look. This is the S04, and I do have to say that this brush actually made it very easy to blend out and to buff out the product. So maybe let's add a little bit of some, definition, or like a defining color. So I have this Harvest color from the Groundworks Defining Neutral Palettes of Danessa Myrix, and I'm just really tapping the brush head here on the creamy putty formula. Remove any excess, and I'm just going to lightly run that across my socket line. And I'm going to buff that out. Again, I'm only using very light, gentle strokes. You don't really need so much effort to work the product into your eyes. Lovely. Interesting. So let me get more of the color Harvest here. Pick up just a little bit. And maybe apply a little bit of that here in my lower waterline or lash line. Okay, buff that out. And to blend it out, and also add a very nice flick there, just so that it creates a lift for my eye. And I'm gonna pick up some more, and I'm gonna apply that here in my upper lash line, just to have a nice soft definition of color. And with whatever is left on the brush head here, I'm just gonna bring that into the socket line and buff everything. Look at that, I love it. And maybe as a final step, let me add a nice sparkle on my eyelid. So I have this Chanel liquid eyeshadow that I've had for quite some time. This was limited edition. It's gone now and it's in gold. So let me just pick up that color using the S01, the blending brush. And I'm just gonna lightly apply this all over, just so that we have a nice topper color of sparkle over there, which is absolutely gorgeous. And maybe just to complete the look, I'm gonna apply a little bit of some eyeliner close to my lash line as possible. I'm not gonna make it too thick, but just enough to give a soft definition on my lash line. Okay, and to top it off, some mascara. Alright, so I believe we have come to the end of our vlog for today. So I hope that you guys enjoyed me showing you how I got to know these three eyeshadow brushes from Fude Bobo, which belongs to her Nebulae series. And I was actually able to showcase them in creating a nice dramatic eye look, or this very nice gentle eye look that you can do every day. And most especially, I was so happy that I was able to use this with a lot of my liquid and cream eyeshadow products, especially the Caviar sticks, because sometimes they can be quite difficult to work with, and these three eyeshadow brushes actually really did help me to create a nice job for us today. Okay, now before I let you go, let me say one more thing, is that having these eyeshadow brushes now with me actually kind of completes so far the Nebulae collection that I have here from Fude Bobo and Chikuhodo. look at that. And I do have to say that the Nebulae series is one of the best, like, brush series in the market today. So if you can, like, grab them, do so, because it's actually quite special. And what I love about this is that you have different mixes of bristles in the brush head here. So you have, like, mixes of gray squirrel, or like you have psycho hair, or you have, like, fitch, or like even tea squirrel. So at least it gives you variety. And if you're someone who's fairly new into the fooder world, at least having this can give you, like, a taste of how different bristles work together to give you a very nice, like, either beautiful eye look, or even a very beautiful makeup base. So yes, and with that, I am hoping that the Nebulae series of Fude Bobo will continue to flourish. Now I think we're okay with, like, the eyeshadow brushes here, because you have different sizes here already, and then you have different thickness that can really help you to, like, achieve whatever type of eye makeup look that you want to go for. And they also have the SO2 here. So if you're finding that the SO5 here is a very thick brush head for you to become detailed with your, like, eyeliner application, the SO2 can really help you get into the most difficult parts of your eye. And if you are someone who missed the smudger brushes of Sonia G from her original release, this is a nice, like, dupe for that. Okay, yeah. And I'm hoping we'll have more face brushes from the Nebulae series, because I think they're actually very, very good. So far we only have one face brush here, and I'm hoping that we will have more in the future. Okay. Oh yes, so that's it for me today. So if you guys have any more questions about how I got to know these three brushes, the latest addition into the Nebulae series of Fude Bobo and Chikuhodo, please let me know down in the comments box, and let's have a conversation about it. Alright? Okay, so that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Thank you so much. Fude Bobo. Arigatou gozaimasu.